The CEO millionaire was enjoying dinner with his fiancée until a child ran to him, calling him Dad. What happened next will leave you speechless. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and let us know where you're reading from in the comments. The Manhattan skyline glittered like a sea of stars beneath the glass walls of the Celestial, New York's most exclusive rooftop restaurant. 60 stories above the bustling streets, Nicholas Hale sat at a private corner table, the city spread beneath him like a kingdom he had conquered. At 40, he had amassed a fortune that made other millionaires look like penny pinchers. Tonight, his Italian suit was impeccably tailored, his platinum watch worth more than most people's homes, and his expression, as always, coolly confident. Across from him sat Victoria Sinclair, 29, with flawless skin and a smile that had graced the covers of fashion magazines worldwide. Her diamond earrings caught the candlelight as she lifted her champagne flute. The enormous engagement ring on her finger, a rare blue diamond surrounded by smaller white ones, seemed to absorb and then magnify the soft glow of the restaurant. "To us," Nicholas said, raising his glass. His voice was measured, precise, the same voice that had closed billion-dollar deals and destroyed competitors without ever raising its volume. "To a partnership that makes perfect sense." Victoria's red lips curved upward. "To us," she echoed. Her fashion empire complemented his business holdings perfectly. The tabloids called them the power couple of the decade. Their marriage would merge not just their lives, but their empires. A violin quartet played softly in the background. The maitre d' hovered nearby, ensuring that no one, absolutely no one, would disturb Mr. Hale's evening. The chef had prepared a 9-course tasting menu specifically for them, dishes that weren't on the regular menu. Nicholas liked control. He liked predictability. He had built his life around these principles since he was a scholarship student, fighting his way out of poverty. Emotions were messy. Nicholas preferred clean lines and clear expectations. Even this engagement had been preceded by a prenuptial agreement thicker than most novels. "Have you decided on a date?" Victoria asked, setting down her glass. Nicholas nodded. "I've had my assistant book 3 options: spring in the Hamptons, summer in Lake Como, or fall in Kyoto. You can choose." He saw relationships the way he saw business deals, transactions with clear parameters. Victoria smiled, pleased with the options. "I'll have my stylist research which season would photograph best for the exclusive." Nicholas nodded approvingly. They understood each other. Victoria didn't expect romantic gestures or emotional declarations. She wanted status, security, and social supremacy. He wanted a partner who enhanced his image and could host the perfect dinner party for clients. Love, in Nicholas's experience, was unreliable. This arrangement was better. "The Tokyo acquisition is closing next week," Nicholas said, reaching for his water glass. "We should plan to be there for at least—" "Dad?" The voice was small, trembling, and so out of place in the hushed elegance of the Celestial that for a moment Nicholas wasn't sure he'd heard it at all. But then he saw Victoria's perfectly shaped eyebrows rise, her gaze shifting to something, someone, behind him. Nicholas turned, glass still in hand. A little girl stood there, perhaps 8 years old, wearing jeans and a faded purple sweater that had seen better days. Her hair fell in chestnut curls around a heart-shaped face, and her wide hazel eyes were rimmed with red, as though she'd been crying. In her arms she clutched a well-worn stuffed rabbit, its fur matted and one ear slightly torn. "Dad," she repeated, her voice quavering. "Are you Nicholas Hale?" Victoria's champagne glass nearly slipped from her fingers. "Nicholas?" Her voice was sharp as a razor. "What is this?" The maitre d' rushed over, mortified. "Mr. Hale, I am so deeply sorry. I don't know how she got past security. We'll remove her immediately." He reached for the girl's shoulder. "Don't touch me!" The child flinched away, clutching her rabbit tighter. "Please, I'm looking for my dad. My mom said—" Her voice cracked. "My mom said to find Nicholas Hale if anything happened to her." Nicholas felt the restaurant's ambient noise fade away, replaced by a strange ringing in his ears. He set his glass down with more force than intended, the crystal making a harsh sound against the table. "There's been a mistake," he said firmly, his voice cool and dismissive. "I don't have a child." He turned to the maitre d'. "Please escort her out and call security." But the girl didn't move. Instead, she stepped closer, and for the first time, Nicholas really looked at her face, the shape of her eyes, the curve of her chin, the way her bottom lip trembled slightly, just like someone he had once known. "Your name is Nicholas Andrew Hale," she said, her small voice somehow filling the space between them. "You grew up in Buffalo. Your mom was a teacher. You like black coffee and you hate raisins." Nicholas felt the blood drain from his face. Details no one knew, not even Victoria. Details only someone close to him would know. "Who put you up to this?" he demanded, his voice losing its usual control. "Who sent you?" The girl reached into the pocket of her jeans and pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn at the creases as if it had been opened and refolded many times. "My mom gave me this before she swallowed hard. Before she died. She said if anything ever happened to her, I should find you." Victoria's face had transformed from shock to disgust. She pushed her chair back from the table slightly, as if to distance herself from the unfolding scene. "Nicholas," she hissed, "what is going on?" The restaurant had gone quiet. The violin quartet had stopped playing. Other diners were trying not to stare, but failing miserably. Nicholas Hale, the man whose face graced business magazines, whose name was synonymous with ruthless precision, was being called Dad by a child in worn clothes. Nicholas stood abruptly, his napkin falling to the floor. "Let's continue this conversation somewhere private," he said, his voice tight. He turned to Victoria. "I'll handle this. It won't take long." Victoria's eyes were cold. "Yes, you will handle this." Nicholas gestured to the maitre d'. "Your office, now." Minutes later, in the restaurant manager's small office, Nicholas stood with his arms crossed, looking down at the girl who sat in a leather chair much too big for her small frame. Her feet didn't reach the floor. The stuffed rabbit sat in her lap, its button eyes staring vacantly. "What's your name?" Nicholas asked, his voice slightly less harsh but still guarded. "Lily," she said. "Lily Walker?" The name hit Nicholas like a physical blow. Walker, as in Amelia Walker, a name he hadn't allowed himself to think about in years. 9 years, to be exact. "And your mother was," Lily corrected, her voice small. "My mom was Amelia Walker. She died 2 weeks ago." The confirmation knocked the air from Nicholas's lungs. He gripped the edge of the desk to steady himself. Amelia, dead. It wasn't possible. "How?" The word came out rough, almost a whisper. "Car accident," Lily said, looking down at her rabbit. "They said she didn't suffer." Nicholas ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, disturbing it for the first time that evening. Amelia. Brilliant, beautiful Amelia, with her infectious laugh and stubborn idealism. The woman he'd met in graduate school, whose passion for literature had been so at odds with his relentless ambition. The woman he'd loved, truly loved, before he decided that love was a liability in his quest for success. "And you're claiming to be my—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Lily held out the folded paper. "Mom said you wouldn't believe me. She wrote this for you." Nicholas took the letter, his fingers strangely numb. He unfolded it and immediately recognized Amelia's handwriting, looping and artistic, just like she had been. So different from his own precise script. "Nicholas, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and Lily has found you as I instructed her to. Yes, she's yours. I was 8 weeks pregnant when you left. I tried to tell you, called your new office in New York several times, but your assistant said you were too busy to speak with me. After the 3rd attempt, I received a letter from your lawyer warning me against further contact. I decided then that if you didn't want me in your life, you probably wouldn't want our child either. So, I never told you. Perhaps that was wrong of me. But I gave Lily everything I could. Love, security, happiness. She's smart, Nicholas. So smart. Like you. I have no family left to take her. My parents are gone, and my sister lives abroad with health issues that make caring for a child impossible. You are her father. You are all she has now. I'm not asking you to love her, though she's very easy to love. I'm asking you to take responsibility, to give her the home and security that I no longer can. She knows about you. I never lied to her. I told her you were a busy, important man who didn't know about her. I never said a bad word about you, though God knows there were times I wanted to. Take care of our daughter, Nicholas. Amelia. Nicholas read the letter twice, then a third time. His hands were shaking. Amelia's words, direct and unflinching, just as she had always been, cut through his carefully constructed reality. A daughter. He had a daughter. He looked at Lily again, really looked this time. The shape of her nose was his, the determined set of her chin, that was him too. But her eyes, those hazel eyes with flecks of gold, those were all Amelia. Where have you been staying? Since your mother. He couldn't say died again. With Mrs. Finch next door, Lily said, but she's old and her daughter is taking her to a nursing home tomorrow. She said I can't stay there anymore. Her voice was matter of fact, but her knuckles were white where she gripped the stuffed rabbit. Mom said if anything happened, I should find you. She kept your picture. The restaurant manager knocked tentatively on his own office door. Mr. Hale, Ms. Sinclair is asking when you'll be returning to the table. Nicholas had almost forgotten about Victoria, about the engagement dinner, about everything outside this small office where his life was being turned upside down. Tell her I'll be there shortly, he said, not taking his eyes off Lily. The child stood, surprisingly composed for someone so young facing such circumstances. You don't want me, she said quietly. That's okay. Mom said you might not. She said you're very busy and important. Something twisted in Nicholas's chest, something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Guilt, shame, he wasn't sure. That's not, he began, then stopped. What could he say? That he hadn't wanted her? That was true, but only because he hadn't known she existed. That he wanted her now? That would be a lie. He had no idea what he wanted at this moment, except perhaps for the world to stop spinning so wildly out of control. Do you have a suitcase? Belongings? He asked instead. Lily pointed to a small backpack by the door that Nicholas hadn't noticed before. Just this. Mrs. Finch said, I couldn't take much. The rest of our stuff is in our apartment, but the landlord said we have to be out by the end of the month. Their life reduced to a child's backpack. Amelia, who had loved books more than anything, who had filled her tiny college apartment with shelves upon shelves of them, her entire existence now contained in a child's backpack. Nicholas took out his phone and dialed his driver. James, come to the front of the Celestial immediately. There's been a situation. He looked at Lily, who stood silently watching him, still clutching that rabbit. What was he supposed to do with a child? His penthouse wasn't child-friendly. His life wasn't child-friendly. He had meetings scheduled back-to-back for the next week, then the Tokyo trip, the engagement. Victoria. I need to speak with my fiancée, he said. Wait here. Nicholas returned to the dining room where Victoria sat alone, a forced smile on her face as she pretended to enjoy a glass of wine. Her eyes narrowed when she saw him approach. Well, she demanded in a low voice. What was that about? Some sort of extortion attempt? Nicholas sat down, his movements less fluid than usual. She says she's my daughter, from a previous relationship. Victoria's perfectly lined eyes widened. And is she? Nicholas hesitated. She has a letter from her mother, Amelia Walker. We were together in graduate school before I moved to New York. You have a child? Victoria's voice rose slightly, drawing glances from nearby tables. She immediately modulated it. A child you never mentioned? I didn't know, Nicholas said. Amelia never told me she was pregnant. Victoria's expression was skeptical. And now, conveniently, this woman sends her child to find you? Amelia died 2 weeks ago, Nicholas said, the words still feeling unreal. Car accident. Something in Victoria's expression shifted slightly. A flicker of sympathy quickly masked. I see. And this child expects you to, what, take her in? She has nowhere else to go. Victoria set down her wine glass with deliberate care. Nicholas, be realistic. You don't know anything about children. Your schedule barely allows time for sleep. What are you going to do with a child? She was right, of course. His life had no room for a child, especially not one that came with emotional baggage and complications, the exact things Nicholas had spent his adult life avoiding. I'll arrange something, he said vaguely. A boarding school, perhaps, or a guardian. And in the meantime, Victoria pressed, our engagement party is next weekend. The Vanity Fair photographer will be there. What will people say? Before Nicholas could respond, Lily appeared at the edge of their table, her small backpack now slung over one shoulder. She looked even more out of place in the elegant restaurant with her worn clothes and serious expression. "The man said I couldn't stay in the office anymore," she explained quietly. Victoria's gaze swept over the child, taking in the faded clothes, the worn stuffed animal, the unmistakable resemblance to Nicholas in the shape of her face. "Nicholas," she said, her voice tight. "If you take her in, we're done. I didn't sign up for someone else's child. I didn't sign up for this kind of complication." Lily's eyes widened slightly at Victoria's words, but she didn't cry. Instead, she seemed to make herself smaller, clutching her rabbit closer. Nicholas felt trapped between two impossible choices. Victoria represented everything he had worked for: status, order, a carefully controlled future. But Lily was his flesh and blood, a piece of Amelia that somehow still existed in the world. "My driver is downstairs," he said finally. "He'll take Lily to the plaza for tonight. I'll make arrangements tomorrow." Victoria's expression relaxed slightly. "Good, that's sensible." She reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "We'll figure this out. Perhaps her mother had relatives who can take her." "Mom said you wouldn't want me," Lily whispered, so softly that Nicholas almost didn't hear her. But he did hear, and the words pierced something deep inside him, a place he thought he had walled off years ago. He stood abruptly. "I need to make sure she gets to the car safely. I'll be right back." As they rode the elevator down 60 floors, Nicholas and Lily stood in silence. She kept a careful distance from him, her small hand gripping the strap of her backpack so tightly that her knuckles were white. "You'll stay at the plaza tonight," Nicholas said as the elevator descended. "It's a nice hotel. My driver James will make sure you're comfortable." Lily nodded but didn't speak. "Tomorrow we'll—" Nicholas trailed off. Tomorrow what? What was he supposed to do with this child who had appeared out of nowhere and turned his perfectly ordered life upside down? The elevator doors opened to the lobby, and they walked through the polished marble expanse to the front entrance, where James waited with the black Bentley. "James, this is Lily," Nicholas said. "She'll be staying at the plaza tonight. Please make sure she's settled in properly." James, ever professional, showed no surprise at being asked to escort a child to a hotel. "Of course, sir. Miss Lily, may I take your backpack?" Lily shook her head, clutching it tighter. Nicholas looked down at the girl, his daughter, and felt a strange tightness in his chest. "I'll call in the morning," he said awkwardly, "to check on you." Lily looked up at him, those hazel eyes, Amelia's eyes, searching his face. "It's okay," she said in a small voice. "You can forget about me if you want to. Mom said you're very important and busy." The words hit Nicholas like a physical blow. Even in death, Amelia was making him face truths he'd rather avoid. "I'll call in the morning," he repeated, more firmly this time. "Good night, Lily." As James opened the car door for her, Lily paused and looked back at Nicholas. "My bunny's name is Carrots," she said suddenly. "Mom got him for me when I was a baby. She said everyone needs somebody to talk to." With that, she climbed into the Bentley, Carrots clutched tightly to her chest. James closed the door gently, nodded to Nicholas, and got into the driver's seat. Nicholas stood on the sidewalk and watched the Bentley pull away, carrying his newly discovered daughter into the night. Above him, 60 floors up, Victoria waited in the Celestial, representing the life he had planned so carefully. But as he turned to re-enter the building, Nicholas couldn't shake the image of those hazel eyes, so like Amelia's, or the worn stuffed rabbit named Carrots that seemed to be Lily's only friend in the world. For the first time in years, Nicholas Hale felt something crack in the icy control he maintained over his life. And for the first time in years, he wasn't immediately sure how to fix it. Nicholas rode the elevator back up to the Celestial, his mind racing. By the time he returned to the table, he had composed himself, his expression once again a mask of cool control. "Is it taken care of?" Victoria asked, examining her manicure. "For tonight," Nicholas said, sitting down. "I've sent her to the plaza with James." Victoria nodded approvingly. "Good. Now, let's forget this unpleasantness and continue our evening." She signaled for the waiter to bring the next course. But Nicholas couldn't focus on the exquisite food or Victoria's conversation about their upcoming engagement party. His mind kept returning to the letter in his pocket, Amelia's handwriting, her direct words cutting through the years of silence. And Lily's face, so clearly a blend of his features and Amelia's, kept appearing in his thoughts. "Nicholas? Are you listening to me? Victoria's sharp voice cut through his thoughts. I'm sorry, he said automatically. What were you saying? Victoria's irritation was visible in the tight set of her shoulders. I was discussing the guest list for Tokyo. The ambassador's wife specifically asked to be seated near you. Of course, Nicholas said, forcing himself to focus. That makes sense. But as the evening dragged on, Nicholas found himself checking his phone repeatedly, wondering if James had sent any updates about Lily. Had she eaten dinner? Was she scared, alone in a hotel room after losing her mother just 2 weeks ago? By the time they left the restaurant, Victoria's patience had worn thin. I hope you'll have this situation resolved soon, she said, as they rode in his second car back to her penthouse. We have too much at stake for distractions. Nicholas nodded absently. When they reached her building, he declined to come up, citing an early meeting the next day. Victoria's goodbye kiss was cool, perfunctory. Back in his own penthouse, Nicholas poured himself a scotch and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Central Park. The city lights glittered below, a view he had paid $20 million for. But tonight, it gave him no satisfaction. He took out Amelia's letter again, reading it for perhaps the 20th time that evening. Then he reached for his phone and Googled Amelia Walker death. Sure enough, there it was, a small obituary from a local paper in Connecticut. Amelia Walker, 38, librarian and beloved mother, killed in a car accident 2 weeks earlier, survived by her daughter, Lily. Nicholas scrolled through search results until he found a photo. Amelia at some library event, her hair shorter than he remembered, but her smile just as bright. His chest tightened at the sight. He hadn't allowed himself to think of her in years. They had met in graduate school, he studying business, she literature. An unlikely pair, but there had been something between them that defied logic. Amelia had been brilliant, passionate, idealistic. She had believed in Nicholas before anyone else did, encouraged his ambitions even while questioning his methods. For 2 years, they had been inseparable. Nicholas had even considered asking her to come with him to New York when he got his first big break. But in the end, he had chosen his career. Amelia had wanted a simple life, books, teaching, maybe children someday. Nicholas had wanted empire building. They had broken up 3 days before he left for New York. He had called her once, 6 months later, but a male voice had answered her phone. Nicholas had hung up without speaking, buried himself in work, and never looked back. Until now. Now there was Lily, his daughter. Proof that Amelia had carried a piece of him all these years without his knowledge. Nicholas couldn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lily's face, those solemn hazel eyes, so much like her mother's, looking up at him expectantly, waiting for him to be a father when he had no idea how. At 6 a.m., he gave up on sleep and called James. "How is she?" he asked without preamble. "Miss Lily is still sleeping, sir," James replied. "She had a bit of trouble settling in last night, but the hotel staff were very accommodating." "What kind of trouble?" There was a slight hesitation. "She was upset, sir, crying for her mother. The hotel manager called me around midnight, and I returned to sit with her until she fell asleep." Nicholas felt a stab of guilt. Of course she had been upset. She was a child who had lost her mother and been abandoned at a hotel by a father who hadn't even known she existed until hours earlier. "Thank you, James," Nicholas said, genuinely grateful. "Please stay with her until I arrive. I'll be there at 8. Next, Nicholas called his lawyer, Jonathan Wells. "I need you to verify a paternity claim," Nicholas said without greeting, "and I need information on a deceased woman named Amelia Walker, formerly of New Haven, Connecticut, most recently residing in Westport. Find out about her estate, her will, and custody arrangements for her daughter." "I'll get right on it," Jonathan said, unfazed by the abrupt request. He was used to Nicholas's direct manner. "Do you want me to arrange for testing?" Nicholas hesitated. Did he need a DNA test? Looking at Lily, he had little doubt she was his, but still, procedure was procedure. "Yes," he said finally, but discreetly. By 8 o'clock, Nicholas was entering the Plaza Hotel, dressed in a fresh suit, but feeling the effects of his sleepless night. He found James sitting in the lobby, reading a newspaper. "She's having breakfast in the restaurant, sir," James said, folding his paper. "She didn't want to order room service, said it was too expensive." Nicholas raised an eyebrow. What 8-year-old worried about the cost of room service? He found Lily sitting alone at a table for two in the hotel's palm-filled breakfast room. She wore the same clothes as the previous night, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Carrots. The rabbit sat on the chair beside her as she carefully cut a piece of toast into small, precise squares. She looked up as Nicholas approached, her expression guarded. "Good morning," she said formally, as if greeting a stranger. "Good morning," Nicholas replied, equally formal. He sat down across from her, feeling oddly awkward. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes, thank you," Lily said, though the shadows under her eyes suggested otherwise. The bed was very soft. A waiter appeared at Nicholas's elbow. "Coffee, sir?" "Black, please," Nicholas said. When the waiter left, he turned back to Lily. "Are you comfortable here?" Lily nodded, still methodically cutting her toast. "It's very fancy. Mom and I stayed in a hotel once when we visited my aunt in Boston, but it wasn't like this." Nicholas watched her carefully controlled movements. She was so composed for a child her age. Too composed, perhaps. "Lily," he began, then paused, unsure how to continue. "I'm sorry about your mother." Lily's knife stilled for a moment. "She's in heaven now," she said, her voice small but steady. "That's what Mrs. Finch says." Nicholas, who had never been religious, didn't know how to respond to that. Instead, he said, "I've asked my lawyer to look into your mother's arrangements, to see what she wanted for you." "She wanted me to find you," Lily said simply, looking up from her plate. "She kept your picture in her bedside drawer. When I asked about my dad, she showed it to me and said you were very important and lived in New York." Nicholas's coffee arrived, and he took a sip to buy himself time. "Your mother and I, we knew each other a long time ago." "In college," Lily supplied. "She told me. She said you were the smartest person she ever met, but that you wanted different things from life." That was a remarkably diplomatic way to describe their breakup. Trust Amelia to find the gentlest explanation, even for a painful truth. "Lily, I didn't know about you," Nicholas said directly. "Your mother never told me she was going to have a baby." Lily's eyes widened slightly. "Never? Not even when I was born?" "No," Nicholas confirmed. "I only found out last night when you found me." Lily considered this, her head tilted slightly. Again, the gesture was so reminiscent of Amelia that Nicholas felt a sharp pang of something. Loss, regret. He couldn't name it. "Are you mad at Mom?" she asked finally. The question caught Nicholas off guard. Was he? He hadn't allowed himself to consider it yet. "No," he said after a moment. "I'm not mad at her. She must have had her reasons." "She said you were building your empire," Lily said, the adult phrase sounding strange in her childish voice. "She said you wouldn't have time for us." Nicholas felt those words like a physical blow. Had he been so obviously cold, so obviously ambitious, that Amelia had known with certainty he would reject his own child? "I see," was all he could manage. "It's okay," Lily said, with that same heartbreaking maturity. "Not all dads want to be dads. Jenny at school doesn't have a dad either." Nicholas's phone buzzed with a text. It was Jonathan. "DNA test arranged for 11 a.m. at your penthouse. Also, preliminary information on A. Walker. No substantial assets, rented apartment, modest savings. Will name daughter as sole beneficiary. No official guardian designated except for the father, Nicholas Hale, if he accepts responsibility." Nicholas stared at the text. Even in death, Amelia had left the choice to him. If he accepts responsibility. Not demanding, not forcing, just offering him the chance to be a father, if he wanted it. Did he want it? The question loomed over the breakfast table as Lily finished her toast, still feeding imaginary bites to Carrots the rabbit between her own. "Lily," Nicholas said finally, "would you like to see where I live, just for today while we figure things out?" Lily looked at him with those solemn hazel eyes. "Okay," she said simply. Then, after a moment, "Is your house very big?" "It's an apartment," Nicholas corrected automatically. "A penthouse. And yes, it's quite large." "Do you have any other kids?" "No." "A dog?" "No pets." "Books?" At this, Nicholas almost smiled. Of course Amelia's daughter would ask about books. "Yes, I have books." This seemed to satisfy Lily. She carefully placed Carrots back in her small backpack and stood up. "I'm ready." The ride to Nicholas's penthouse was quiet. Lily sat beside him in the back of the Bentley, gazing out the window at the city streets with wide eyes. Occasionally, she would point something out to Carrots, whispering in the stuffed rabbit's torn ear. Nicholas found himself watching her, noting the details he had missed in the shock of the previous night. The small dimple in her right cheek. His mother had had the same one. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking. That was pure Amelia. The careful, precise way she folded the hotel napkin before leaving, that, he realized with a start, was him. His phone rang just as they were pulling up to his building. It was Victoria. Nicholas hesitated, then answered. "Good morning." "Is it handled?" Victoria asked without preamble. "The child situation?" Nicholas glanced at Lily, who was pretending not to listen. "Not quite yet. I'm working on it." "Nicholas, the engagement party is in 6 days. The photographer from Vanity Fair?" "I'm aware of the timeline," Nicholas cut in, his voice cooler than he intended. "I'll call you later." He ended the call before Victoria could protest, something he had never done before. She would be furious, but right now, that seemed less important than the small figure beside him, clutching a worn backpack and a stuffed rabbit. Nicholas's building was one of the most exclusive in Manhattan, a gleaming tower of glass and steel, where apartments started at $15 million. The doorman greeted him by name, his eyes widening slightly at the sight of Lily trailing behind. "Good morning, Mr. Hale," he said, recovering quickly. "Shall I call the elevator for you?" "Please, George," Nicholas replied, placing a hand briefly on Lily's shoulder to guide her toward the private elevator that served only the penthouse levels. Lily's eyes grew even wider as they entered the elevator, its walls lined with mirrors that reflected their images infinitely. "Wow," she whispered. The elevator opened directly into Nicholas's penthouse foyer, a marble-floored expanse featuring a crystal chandelier and a massive abstract painting that had cost more than most people's homes. Lily stood just inside the doorway, clutching Carrots tightly. "It's so white," she said finally. Nicholas looked around his home with fresh eyes. White marble floors, white leather furniture, white walls with carefully selected modern art. Sleek, minimalist, and, he realized suddenly, utterly unwelcoming for a child. "The living room is through here," he said, leading the way. "And the kitchen is—" "Do you live here all by yourself?" Lily interrupted, still not moving from her spot by the door. "Yes," Nicholas said. "Just me." "It's so quiet," Lily whispered. "Our apartment was small, but Mom said it was just the right size for the noise we made. We sang a lot." Nicholas tried to imagine singing in these elegant, echoing rooms and couldn't picture it. "Would you like to see the rest?" Lily nodded and finally stepped further into the penthouse, her sneakers soundless on the thick carpet. She followed Nicholas through the living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, the formal dining room that seated 16, the state-of-the-art kitchen that he rarely used, preferring to have meals prepared and delivered. "This would be your room," Nicholas said, opening the door to one of the guest suites. "If you stayed here." Lily peeked inside at the king-size bed with its pristine white duvet, the chrome and glass furniture, the abstract painting in shades of blue and gray. "It's very grown up," she said diplomatically. "We could make some changes," Nicholas heard himself say, surprising himself. "If you wanted to stay." Lily looked up at him, her expression serious. "Do you want me to stay?" It was the question Nicholas had been asking himself all night. Did he want this child, this unexpected, complicated responsibility in his life? His schedule was packed with meetings, travel, business dinners. His home was designed for an adult, not a child. His relationship with Victoria was clearly at risk. And yet, "I don't know yet," he admitted, the honesty feeling strange on his tongue. "But for now, yes, I'd like you to stay while we figure things out." Lily seemed to accept this partial answer. "Okay," she said simply. "Can Carrot stay too?" "Of course," Nicholas said, feeling oddly relieved. "Carrots is welcome." A knock at the door interrupted them. It was the DNA technician Jonathan had arranged, a discreet woman in business attire who efficiently collected cheek swabs from both Nicholas and Lily, explained that results would be available in 24 to 48 hours, and left. "Was that a doctor?" Lily asked afterward. "Mom took me to lots of doctors when my tummy hurt last year." "Not exactly," Nicholas said, unsure how to explain a paternity test to an 8-year-old. Just a quick check to make sure everything's in order. His phone buzzed again, Victoria, for the 3rd time that morning. He ignored it. Are you hungry? He asked Lily instead. We could have lunch. Lily shook her head. I'm still full from breakfast, but could I maybe take a bath? Mom and I were going to do laundry the day she trailed off. My clothes feel yucky. Nicholas realized with a jolt that Lily had been wearing the same clothes since her mother died 2 weeks ago. Of course she needed clean clothes, and other things, whatever children her age required. Of course, he said. There's a bathroom through there. I'll find you something to wear while your clothes are being cleaned. But what did he have that could possibly fit an 8-year-old girl? Nicholas searched through his closets and finally found a t-shirt from a tech conference that would be like a dress on Lily, and a pair of drawstring pajama pants that could perhaps be rolled up. When he returned to the guest room, the sound of running water told him Lily had already started her bath. He placed the makeshift clothing on the bed and retreated to his office, suddenly desperate for the familiar comfort of work. But even as he sat at his desk, opening his laptop to check the day's emails, Nicholas couldn't focus. His mind kept returning to the child currently taking a bath in his guest bathroom, a child who had his chin and Amelia's eyes, who talked to a stuffed rabbit named Carrots, who had just lost her mother and somehow found her way to a father who hadn't known she existed. Nicholas pulled up his calendar and began canceling meetings, the investors' lunch today, the strategy session this afternoon. He sent a message to his assistant to reschedule everything that wasn't absolutely urgent. Then he called Jonathan again. I need information on schools in the area, he said abruptly. Private schools for an 8-year-old girl. And I need someone to purchase appropriate clothing and whatever else a child that age requires. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Are you planning to take custody? Jonathan asked carefully. I don't know yet, Nicholas said, rubbing his temples. But she needs clothes and things for now. I'll send someone right away, Jonathan promised. And Nicholas, for what it's worth, the preliminary background check on Amelia Walker shows she was an excellent mother, well respected in her community, active in her daughter's school. No red flags whatsoever. I wouldn't have expected any, Nicholas said quietly. After he hung up, Nicholas sat staring at his computer screen without seeing it. The enormity of what was happening, of what might happen, was beginning to sink in. He, Nicholas Hale, might become a father. Not someday in the distant future, as he had vaguely imagined with Victoria, but now, today, to an 8-year-old girl who was already here, already real, already in need of parenting. The thought terrified him. Nicholas was still sitting at his desk, lost in thought, when a small voice broke the silence. Is this okay to wear? He looked up to see Lily standing in the doorway of his office. She was swimming in his conference t-shirt, which hung past her knees, and the pajama pants had been rolled up multiple times but still dragged on the floor. Her wet hair was combed neatly, and she had Carrots clutched under one arm. Yes, that's fine, Nicholas said, closing his laptop. I've arranged for some proper clothes to be delivered soon. Lily nodded seriously. Thank you. These are very comfy, but very big. She looked around his office with curious eyes, taking in the sleek modern desk, the wall of awards and business magazine covers featuring Nicholas, the 3 large monitors. Is this where you work? Yes, Nicholas said. This is my home office. I have another one at my company headquarters. Mom worked at the library, Lily offered. Sometimes she took me with her, and I could read any book I wanted while she worked. Nicholas tried to imagine taking Lily to a board meeting or an investor pitch and couldn't picture it. His world and a child's world seemed fundamentally incompatible. Are you hungry now? He asked, glancing at his watch. It was past noon. Lily shrugged. A little. Nicholas had no idea what children ate for lunch. His own meals were usually prepared by his private chef, or ordered from high-end restaurants. What would you like? Lily thought for a moment. Mac and cheese? She suggested hopefully. Mac and cheese, Nicholas repeated. Did he even have macaroni and cheese in his kitchen? Unlikely, but he could order it. I'll make some calls. 30 minutes later, they sat at opposite ends of Nicholas's massive dining table, an ornate crystal chandelier hanging between them. Nicholas had a kale salad with grilled salmon. Lily had macaroni and cheese from a nearby deli, which she was carefully eating one spoonful at a time, pausing occasionally to offer an imaginary bite to Carrots. "Does Carrots like macaroni and cheese?" Nicholas asked awkwardly, trying to make conversation. Lily looked up, surprised that he had addressed her stuffed rabbit directly. "Yes," she said after a moment. "It's his favorite, but he also likes carrots, of course." "Of course," Nicholas echoed, feeling utterly out of his depth. They ate in silence for a few more minutes before Lily said, "Your house is very fancy." "Thank you," Nicholas replied automatically. "Good. I'll be in my office. I have calls all afternoon." As Nicholas turned to leave, Lily called after him. "Will you come say good night before I go to sleep?" Nicholas paused, caught off guard by the simple request. "I'll try," he said finally. "My last call might run late." He retreated to his office, closed the door, and immersed himself in work, the familiar, comfortable world of numbers, strategies, and negotiations. But even as he discussed the Tokyo deal with his team, part of his mind remained aware of the child in his home, reading Amelia's book in a too-big t-shirt, talking to a stuffed rabbit. Around 4 o'clock, there was a knock at his office door. It was Ms. Chen. "Mr. Hale, the clothing and supplies have arrived. Would you like to see?" Nicholas followed her to the guest room, which had been transformed by the efficient personal shopper Jonathan had hired. On the bed lay neatly organized piles of children's clothing, jeans, t-shirts, sweaters, pajamas, socks, and underwear, all in appropriate sizes. A small suitcase held toiletries, a child-sized toothbrush, mild shampoo, a hairbrush with soft bristles. There were even a few toys, a sketch pad with colored pencils, a puzzle, a set of building blocks. Lily stood by the bed, touching a soft pink sweater with wondering fingers. "Are these all for me?" "Yes," Nicholas said awkwardly. "I wasn't sure what you would like, so there are options." Lily looked up at him with those solemn hazel eyes. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Mom would have said it's too much, but thank you." Nicholas felt that now familiar twist in his chest. What was that sensation? Not quite pain, not quite something else. He cleared his throat. "You're welcome. I'll let you get settled." He retreated once more to his office, but found it harder to concentrate than before. His calls dragged on, discussions of market strategy and acquisition targets feeling strangely hollow. At 7 o'clock, his assistant called to remind him of his dinner with the Japanese investors. "Cancel it," Nicholas heard himself say. "Reschedule for tomorrow." There was a startled pause on the other end of the line. Nicholas Hale never canceled dinner meetings, especially not with key investors. "Is everything all right, sir?" "Fine," Nicholas said shortly. "Something's come up. Just reschedule." He hung up before she could question him further, then sat staring at his computer screen. What was he doing? This wasn't like him. Nicholas Hale didn't cancel meetings for personal reasons. Nicholas Hale didn't let emotions interfere with business. And yet, here he was. At 8 o'clock, Ms. Chen knocked on his door again. "Mr. Hale, Lily has had her bath and is ready for bed. She asked again if you would come say goodnight." Nicholas nodded, saving the document he'd been half-heartedly reviewing. "Thank you, Ms. Chen. You can go home now. I'll see you tomorrow at 8. He walked down the hallway to the guest room. Lily's room, he corrected himself mentally. The door was partially open, and he could see Lily sitting up in the massive king-sized bed, which dwarfed her small frame. She wore new pink pajamas with stars on them, and Carrot sat propped against the pillow beside her. The secret garden lay open on her lap. Nicholas knocked lightly on the doorframe. "May I come in?" Lily looked up, her expression brightening slightly. "You came." "I said I would try," Nicholas reminded her, stepping into the room. "Mom used to say that trying is the first step toward doing," Lily said, closing the book carefully. Again, such an Amelia thing to say. Nicholas sat gingerly on the edge of the bed, feeling strangely like an intruder. "Did you find everything you need?" Lily nodded. "Ms. Chen helped me put everything away. The pajamas are really soft." "Good," Nicholas said, at a loss for what else to say. He had never put a child to bed before, had no memory of anyone putting him to bed as a child. His own father had been largely absent, his mother too busy working multiple jobs to keep them afloat. "Would you like me to turn out the light?" he asked awkwardly. Lily bit her lower lip, a gesture so reminiscent of Amelia that Nicholas felt his breath catch. "Could you read a little bit first? Mom always read before bed. Nicholas hesitated. Reading bedtime stories wasn't something he had ever envisioned himself doing, but Lily was looking at him with those eyes, Amelia's eyes, and he found himself nodding before he could think better of it. "Just a few pages," he said, accepting the book she held out. He opened to where she had placed a bookmark and began to read about Mary Lennox discovering the secret garden. His voice felt stiff at first, formal, but as he continued, he found himself relaxing slightly, even adding a touch of a British accent for the character of Martha. When he glanced up after a few pages, Lily was watching him with a small smile. "Mom did the voices better," she said, not unkindly. "But you're good too." "Thank you," Nicholas said, oddly touched by the backhanded compliment. "That's enough for tonight. It's late." Lily nodded, sliding down under the covers. "Good night, Mr. Hale." Mr. Hale, not Dad. The formality stung in a way Nicholas hadn't expected. "Good night, Lily," he replied, placing the book on the nightstand and standing to go. "Could you leave the bathroom light on?" Lily asked in a small voice. "And the door open a little? It's too quiet here." Nicholas nodded, turning on the bathroom light and adjusting the door as requested. "Sleep well," he said awkwardly. "You too," Lily murmured, already sounding drowsy. "Carrot says thank you for the pajamas." Nicholas retreated to his own room, loosening his tie with a sigh. This day had been unlike any other in his carefully controlled life, and tomorrow promised to be equally challenging. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "We need to talk. Dinner tomorrow, 8 p.m., Le Bernardin. Don't be late." Nicholas stared at the message, feeling the walls of his life closing in. Victoria, the Tokyo deal, the engagement party, all the elements of the future he had planned so meticulously. And now, Lily, asleep down the hall, a complication he had never anticipated. He didn't respond to Victoria's text. Instead, he found himself opening his laptop and searching "parenting 8-year-old girl," reading articles until his eyes grew heavy. Even then, sleep eluded him. He kept thinking of Lily, alone in the big bed, and Amelia, who would never tuck her daughter in again. When Nicholas finally drifted off, he dreamed of Amelia for the first time in years. Amelia, as she had been in graduate school, laughing at something he said, her hazel eyes sparkling. In the dream, she was holding a baby, but when Nicholas tried to see the child's face, he woke with a start. It was just past dawn. Nicholas lay staring at his ceiling, feeling strangely unsettled. Then he heard it, a quiet sound from somewhere in the penthouse. He got up, pulled on a robe, and followed the sound to the kitchen. Lily sat at the kitchen island in her star pajamas, a bowl of cereal in front of her. She was speaking softly to Carrots, who sat propped against the fruit bowl. "And then," she was saying, "when Mom gets better, we'll go back to our apartment, and I'll show her all the new books I read while she was gone." Nicholas froze in the doorway, his heart suddenly pounding. Lily thought her mother was coming back. She didn't understand that Amelia was gone forever. "Lily," he said softly. She looked up, startled, then composed her features into a polite smile. "Good morning. I found the cereal. I hope that's okay." "That's fine," Nicholas said, moving into the kitchen. He poured himself a coffee from the machine that had automatically brewed it at 6, then sat across from her at the island. "Lily, about your mother." Lily's spoon stilled. "I know she's not really getting better," she said, her voice small but steady. "Mrs. Finch explained about heaven, but sometimes I pretend she's just in the hospital and she'll come back." The simple honesty of her statement made Nicholas's throat tighten. "I understand," he said, and was surprised to find that he did. After his own mother died when he was in college, he had sometimes found himself thinking he should call her, before remembering that he couldn't. "Did your mom read you The Secret Garden too?" Lily asked, changing the subject with the mercurial quickness of childhood. "No," Nicholas said, "but your mother gave me that copy a long time ago." Lily's eyes widened. "She did?" "Yes," Nicholas said, the memory clearer now. "For my birthday, our first year of graduate school." "Did you read it?" "I did," Nicholas admitted. "Your mother insisted." Lily smiled slightly, looking down at her cereal. She was bossy about books. She said the right book at the right time could change your whole life. That sounded exactly like Amelia. Nicholas found himself smiling too, the expression feeling foreign on his face. "She was right about a lot of things," he said quietly. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. "Ms. Chen will be here at 8, Nicholas said finally. "I have meetings today, but I should be home for dinner." Lily nodded, accepting this information with the same maturity she had shown about everything else. "Will you read more of The Secret Garden tonight?" The question caught Nicholas off guard, but he found himself nodding. "If you'd like." "I would," Lily said, feeding a spoonful of cereal to Carrots. So would Carrots. And for the first time since Lily had appeared at his table at the Celestial, Nicholas felt something loosen in his chest, a small crack in the ice he had built around himself over the years. As he dressed for work that morning, selecting a tie with more care than usual, Nicholas found himself thinking about Lily's words about her mother. She was bossy about books. It was such a perfect description of Amelia, who had indeed been gently but firmly insistent that Nicholas read beyond business journals and economics texts. "There's more to life than quarterly reports," she had told him once, pushing a novel into his hands. "Stories teach us how to be human." At the time, Nicholas had found her insistence charming, but unnecessary. He was focused on success, on building wealth and power. He had no time for fiction. Now, as he knotted his tie and thought of Lily waiting for him to continue The Secret Garden tonight, he wondered if Amelia had been right all along. The next few days fell into an unexpectedly comfortable routine. Nicholas would have breakfast with Lily before Ms. Chen arrived, then spend the day in meetings, checking in with his assistant about Lily more often than he would have thought possible. In the evenings, he would return home to have dinner with Lily, followed by reading more of The Secret Garden before she went to bed. The DNA test results had come back, confirming what Nicholas had already known in his heart. Lily was definitely his daughter. Jonathan had begun the legal work to establish formal custody, a process that Nicholas found himself pursuing with more determination than he had expected. Victoria had been furious when Nicholas canceled their dinner at Le Bernardin, and even more so when he suggested postponing the engagement party. She had called him repeatedly, left increasingly angry voicemails, and finally appeared at his office unannounced. "You can't be serious about keeping this child," she had said, her perfect features arranged in a look of disbelief. "Nicholas, think about what this will do to our plans, to your image." "She's my daughter," Nicholas had replied, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. "A daughter you never knew about, from a woman in your past. There are boarding schools, Nicholas, arrangements that could be made." The suggestion had left a sour taste in his mouth. "She just lost her mother. I'm not sending her away." Victoria had left his office in a controlled fury, their engagement hanging by a thread. But strangely, Nicholas found he cared less about that than he would have expected. His mind was more occupied with making sure Lily had everything she needed, that she was adjusting as well as could be expected to her new life. On Thursday afternoon, Nicholas returned from the office earlier than usual. The penthouse was quiet, too quiet. Miss Chen met him in the foyer, her normally composed expression showing signs of distress. "Mr. Hale, I'm so sorry, but Lily is missing." The words hit Nicholas like a physical blow. "What do you mean, missing?" "She asked to use the bathroom about 20 minutes ago, but when I went to check on her, she was gone. I've searched the entire penthouse. She's not here." For the first time in his adult life, Nicholas Hale felt pure, unadulterated panic. His heart raced, his palms sweated, and his mind conjured terrible images. Lily lost in the streets of New York. Lily hurt. Lily taken. "Did you check the security footage?" he demanded, already pulling out his phone to call the building manager. "Yes, sir. She left through the service elevator about 15 minutes ago." "Alone? How did she get past security?" "She was wearing a delivery uniform, one of the dry cleaning bags. The security guard thought she was with the delivery person. Clever girl. Too clever." Nicholas was already moving toward the door, pulling up the tracking app he'd installed on the new phone he'd bought for Lily. She hadn't taken it with her. Of course not. She had planned this. "Call the police," he told Ms. Chen. "I'm going to look for her." "Where?" Ms. Chen asked, already dialing. Where would she go? Nicholas tried to think like Lily. If he were an 8-year-old girl in a strange city, where would he run to? Then it hit him. Something Lily had said just yesterday during dinner. "Mom and I used to go to this bookstore every Saturday. They had story time for kids, and afterward, Mom would let me pick one book to buy, even though we didn't have a lot of money." The address of her old apartment, Nicholas said. Where is it? Ms. Chen quickly found the information in the file Jonathan had compiled. Westport. It's over an hour away. By the time they returned to the penthouse, Lily was asleep. Nicholas carried her inside, past a relieved Ms. Chen, and laid her gently on her bed. He slipped off her shoes and pulled the covers over her, carrots tucked securely under her arm. Call the police and tell them she's been found, he told Ms. Chen quietly, and cancel my meetings for tomorrow. All of them? Ms. Chen asked, surprised. Even the Tokyo call? It's the final negotiation before you leave on Sunday. Sunday, the Tokyo trip. Nicholas had almost forgotten. He was scheduled to fly to Japan for a week to close the biggest deal of his career, the acquisition that would cement Hale Industries as a global powerhouse and personally add billions to Nicholas's net worth. He looked back at Lily, sleeping peacefully in the too-big bed. Especially the Tokyo call, he said firmly. And contact my travel department. I won't be going to Tokyo. Ms. Chen's eyes widened. But sir, the deal can be handled by Jenkins. He's been working on it with me from the beginning. He can close it. But you've been working on this acquisition for over a year. It's your deal. Nicholas looked at his assistant steadily. Some things are more important. Ms. Chen's expression softened as she glanced at the sleeping child. I'll make the arrangements. After she left, Nicholas sat in the chair by Lily's bed, watching her sleep. Her face in repose looked even more like Amelia's. The same delicate features, the same slight furrow between her brows even in sleep. But the determined set of her jaw, the straight line of her nose, those were pure Nicholas. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Where are you? The planner needs final approval on the engagement party arrangements. Nicholas looked at the message, then back at Lily. The engagement party was scheduled for Saturday night, a lavish affair for 200 guests at the plaza, with exclusive coverage by Vanity Fair. It had been designed to officially announce their union to New York society and the business world. But the thought of attending the party, of smiling for cameras and making polite conversation while Lily was at home with a nanny made Nicholas feel strangely hollow. He texted back, "We need to talk. Breakfast tomorrow, my office, 8 a.m. Victoria's response was immediate. Fine, this better be good. Nicholas put his phone away and continued his vigil by Lily's bed, his mind clearer than it had been in years. For the first time since he left graduate school, since he left Amelia, he was making a decision based not on profit or prestige or power, but on love. The realization should have terrified him. Instead, it filled him with a strange peace. When Lily woke the next morning, Nicholas was sitting at the kitchen island, drinking coffee and reading the file Jonathan had sent over regarding her mother's estate. It wasn't much, the small savings account, a modest life insurance policy, the lease on their apartment which had already been terminated. But there were also books, hundreds of books that had been placed in storage when the apartment was cleared out. Nicholas had already arranged to have them delivered to the penthouse. "Good morning," Lily said cautiously, climbing onto the stool across from him. She was still in yesterday's clothes, her hair a tangled mess. "Good morning," Nicholas replied, setting down the file. "How did you sleep?" "Okay," Lily said, eyeing him warily. "Am I in trouble now?" Nicholas considered the question. "Yes," he said finally. "What you did was dangerous and irresponsible. New York isn't safe for a child alone." Lily's shoulders slumped. "But," Nicholas continued, "I understand why you did it. You miss your mother. You wanted to feel close to her." Lily nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I've arranged to have your mother's books brought here," Nicholas said quietly. "All of them. We can put them in your room, or we could convert one of the spare rooms into a library for them." Lily's head snapped up, her eyes wide. "Really? All her books?" "All of them," Nicholas confirmed. "And I thought perhaps we could visit the reading garden when it reopens after renovations. Maybe make it a regular Saturday trip, like you used to do with your mother." Lily's expression transformed, hope blooming across her features. "You'd do that?" "I would," Nicholas said simply. "And there's something else we need to discuss. I'm not going to Tokyo on Sunday." Lily looked confused. "Tokyo?" "It's a business trip I had planned, a very important one, but I'm not going." "Because of me?" Lily asked, her voice small. "Because I want to be here," Nicholas corrected gently. "With you. We're just getting to know each other. That's more important than any business deal. Lily stared at him for a long moment, her hazel eyes, Amelia's eyes, searching his face for sincerity. Apparently finding it, she slid off her stool and came around the island. Before Nicholas knew what was happening, she had wrapped her arms around his waist in a tentative hug. "Thank you," she whispered against his shirt. Awkwardly, unfamiliar with such displays of affection, Nicholas patted her back. "You're welcome," he said, his voice rougher than usual. Lily pulled back, suddenly shy. "Can we have pancakes? Mom made them on Fridays." "I don't know how to make pancakes," Nicholas admitted. He'd never cooked a meal in his life. "I do," Lily said, her expression brightening. "Mom taught me. I can show you." And that was how Victoria found them 30 minutes later when she arrived for their scheduled meeting. Nicholas Hale, billionaire CEO, standing in his kitchen with flour on his suit, attempting to flip a misshapen pancake under the critical supervision of a small girl in rumpled clothes. "What is this?" Victoria demanded from the kitchen doorway, her voice sharp with disbelief. Nicholas turned, the spatula still in his hand. "Victoria, you're early." "Clearly," she said, her gaze moving from Nicholas to Lily, who had shrunk behind him slightly. "I thought the child was staying in a hotel." "Her name is Lily," Nicholas said quietly. "And no, she's staying here, with me." Victoria's perfect eyebrows rose. "I see. And does this domestic scene mean what I think it means?" Nicholas set down the spatula and wiped his hands on a kitchen towel. "Lily, would you mind giving us a few minutes? The pancakes can wait." Lily nodded solemnly, sliding off her stool. "I'll go brush my teeth," she said, clearly sensing the tension in the room. She gave Victoria a wide berth as she left the kitchen. When she was gone, Nicholas turned to face Victoria fully. "I'm not going to Tokyo," he said without preamble, "and I think we should postpone the engagement party." Victoria's expression hardened. "Because of her?" "Because I need time," Nicholas said. "Things have changed, Victoria." "I've changed. In a week?" Victoria's laugh was cold. "Don't be ridiculous, Nicholas. You've known this child for a few days. She's a complication, not a reason to throw away everything we've built." "What exactly have we built?" Nicholas asked quietly. The question had been forming in his mind since Lily arrived, but only now did he have the courage to voice it. "A merger? A business arrangement?" Victoria's eyes flashed. "A partnership. A future. Everything you said you wanted." "I'm not sure what I want anymore," Nicholas admitted. "But I do know that Lily needs me, and I'm beginning to think I need her too." Victoria stared at him, comprehension dawning in her eyes. "You're choosing her," she said flatly. "Over me, over us." "I'm choosing to be a father," Nicholas corrected. "I'm choosing to be the kind of man who doesn't abandon his child to close a business deal or attend a party." "The kind of man who breaks his engagement instead?" Victoria's voice was razor sharp. Nicholas looked at her steadily. "If that's what it comes to, yes. I hope it doesn't. I hope you can understand and accept that Lily is part of my life now. But if you can't..." He left the sentence unfinished, but its meaning was clear. Victoria's face hardened into a mask of controlled anger. "You'll regret this," she said quietly. "When the novelty wears off and you're left with a child who disrupts your life, your schedule, your freedom, when you realize what you've thrown away..." "Maybe," Nicholas acknowledged. "But I don't think so." Victoria gathered her designer handbag, her movements precise and controlled. "I'll have my things removed from your penthouse by the end of the day. You can tell the press whatever you want about the engagement." "Victoria," Nicholas began, but she cut him off with a raised hand. "Don't," she said icily. "Just don't." She turned and left, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. Nicholas heard the elevator doors open and close, and then she was gone. He stood in the kitchen, surrounded by the mess of their attempted pancake making, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and relief. The life he had planned so carefully was falling apart around him. The Tokyo deal, the engagement, the carefully constructed future, all of it changing because of one small girl with hazel eyes and a worn stuffed rabbit. "Is she gone?" Lily's voice came from the doorway. She stood there in her rumpled clothes, her hair now neatly brushed, watching Nicholas with solemn eyes. "Yes," Nicholas said simply. "Is she mad?" Yes, Nicholas admitted, seeing no point in lying. She is. Lily came back into the kitchen, climbing onto her stool again. Because of me? Nicholas shook his head. Number. Because of choices I'm making. Adult choices that have nothing to do with you. Lily looked skeptical, but didn't press the issue. Instead, she pointed to the half-mixed pancake batter. Should we finish making breakfast? Nicholas looked at the bowl of lumpy batter, then at Lily's hopeful expression. Absolutely, he said, picking up the spoon again. You'll have to show me how. I'm not very good at this. That's okay, Lily said seriously. I'll teach you. As they resumed their cooking lesson, Nicholas realized with sudden clarity that he had made the right choice. The Tokyo deal would have made him richer, and marrying Victoria would have added to his social standing. But neither would have given him this simple moment of connection, of learning something new with his daughter. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Nicholas Hale was exactly where he wanted to be. The weeks that followed brought changes to the penthouse that Nicholas would never have imagined possible. The stark white walls of the guest room, now firmly established as Lily's room, were painted a soft yellow at her request. Nicholas had hired a decorator, expecting to be presented with sophisticated options, only to have Lily firmly state she wanted sunshine walls. The decorator had looked to Nicholas for direction, clearly expecting him to override the child's choice. Instead, Nicholas had nodded and said, "Sunshine walls it is." Amelia's books arrived from storage, dozens of boxes filled with carefully packed volumes, everything from classic literature to modern fiction, poetry collections to children's stories. Nicholas converted one of the unused bedrooms into a library with custom shelves built to house the collection and comfortable reading chairs arranged by the windows overlooking the park. When the room was finished, Lily had stood in the doorway, her eyes wide with wonder. "It's just like Mom's library, but bigger," she had whispered. Then she'd turned to Nicholas with tears in her eyes. "Thank you." That simple thank you had meant more to Nicholas than any business accolade he'd ever received. The Tokyo deal had closed successfully under Jenkins' guidance, though not quite as favorably as it might have with Nicholas at the helm. The business press had speculated wildly about Nicholas Hale's sudden delegation of the deal he'd pursued for over a year, but Nicholas found he cared little for their theories. The end of his engagement to Victoria had caused an even bigger stir. Page 6 had run the headline, "Power Couple Splits, Hale Trades, Fiancée for Fatherhood." The article had been filled with quotes from sources close to the couple, mostly painting Nicholas as having a midlife crisis and Victoria as the wrong party. Nicholas had ignored it all, focusing instead on the more important task of becoming a father to Lily. It wasn't always easy. There were difficult nights when Lily cried for her mother, times when she tested boundaries with the same stubborn determination that had led her to sneak out to find the bookstore. There were awkward parent-teacher conferences at the private school where Nicholas had enrolled her, where he sat among mothers and fathers who had been parenting for years while he was still learning the basics. But there were good moments too, moments that made everything else fade into insignificance. The first time Lily had called him Dad instead of Mr. Hale, casually, as if she hadn't even noticed the shift. The Saturday mornings they spent together at the reading garden after it reopened, establishing their own ritual of story time and one new book each week. The evening Nicholas had come home to find Lily had attempted to cook dinner, a disastrous but touching effort that had ended with them ordering pizza and eating it on the floor of the kitchen amid the mess. Now, 3 months after Lily had appeared at his table at the Celestial, Nicholas stood in the doorway of what had once been his home office and was now in the midst of transformation. The sleek modern desk remained, but the stark minimalist decor was giving way to something warmer, more inviting. Bookshelves had been added along one wall. A comfortable window seat had been installed beneath the floor-to-ceiling windows. A second, smaller desk had been placed perpendicular to Nicholas's, a desk for Lily to do her homework while he worked. Lily considered this, her small face solemn. "Sometimes I'm afraid I'll forget her," she confessed. "Already I can't remember exactly what her voice sounded like when she read to me." Nicholas moved to sit beside her on the window seat. "You won't forget her," he said firmly. "She'll always be part of you. And now we can remember her together." Lily leaned against his side, a gesture of trust and affection that still amazed Nicholas. "Can you tell me a story about her?" she asked. "From when you knew her?" Nicholas thought for a moment, then smiled as a memory surfaced. Did you know your mother once got us kicked out of a museum? Lily's eyes widened. Mom? But she loved museums. She did, Nicholas agreed, which is why she was so offended when one of the guides gave incorrect information about a painting. She corrected him, repeatedly, until the security guard asked us to leave. Lily giggled. That sounds like Mom. She always said if you know something is wrong, you should say so. She lived by that principle, Nicholas said, remembering Amelia's fierce honesty, her unwillingness to let falsehoods stand unchallenged. It was one of the things I admired most about her. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows. Time for bed, Nicholas said finally. You have school tomorrow. Lily didn't protest, sliding off the window seat with a yawn. At the door, she paused. Dad? I'm glad you're my dad. The simple statement hit Nicholas with unexpected force. I'm glad too, he said, his voice rough with emotion. More than you know. After Lily had gone back to bed, Nicholas returned to his desk, but instead of the adoption papers, he found himself opening his laptop and pulling up a document he'd been working on privately. It was a letter to Amelia, a letter she would never read, but one he needed to write nonetheless. Amelia, our daughter, found me. Just as you knew she would, just as you planned. I wish I could tell you how sorry I am, that I wasn't there, that I didn't know, that I missed 9 years of Lily's life. I wish I could thank you for raising such an extraordinary child on your own. She has your intelligence, your kindness, your love of books. She even has your habit of tucking her hair behind her ear when she's thinking. She misses you terribly. We both do. I'm trying to be the father she deserves. Some days I think I'm failing miserably. Other days, when she smiles at me, or calls me dad, or falls asleep against my shoulder while I'm reading to her, I think maybe I'm not doing so badly after all. The man you knew in graduate school wouldn't recognize me now. My priorities have shifted completely. The empire I spent so many years building seems less important with each passing day. What matters now is making sure Lily feels safe, loved, and happy. I keep your books in a special library in our home. Lily says it's just like your library, but bigger. I hope you would approve. She reads from your collection every day, and sometimes I catch her talking to the books as if she's talking to you. I tell her stories about you. Not all of them. Some memories are still too painful to share, but enough that she knows how remarkable you were, how bright, how passionate, how unflinchingly honest. I'm trying to honor your memory by being the best father I can be to our daughter. I hope, wherever you are, you can see that. With love and gratitude, Nicholas read over the letter, then saved it without printing it. It was enough to have written the words, to have acknowledged the debt he owed to the woman who had given him the greatest gift of his life, even if he had discovered it too late to thank her. The following Friday, Nicholas sat in the elementary school gymnasium, surrounded by parents with cameras and proud smiles. Lily stood beside her solar system model, explaining the planets and their orbits to anyone who stopped to look. Her teacher had placed a gold star on the display, marking it as one of the standout projects. As Lily spotted Nicholas in the crowd, her face lit up with a smile so radiant it rivaled her glowing sun model. She waved enthusiastically, and Nicholas waved back, feeling a warmth in his chest that had become familiar over the past months. Jenkins approached through the crowd of parents, looking distinctly out of place in his business suit among the casual Friday attire of the other adults. The Tokyo team needs an answer on the expansion proposal, he said without preamble. The call is scheduled for 3 o'clock your time. Nicholas checked his watch. It was already 2:30. He looked back at Lily, who was now demonstrating to a group of classmates how the planets rotated. Reschedule it, he said firmly,